Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we share a powerful journey of love, betrayal, and the unexpected paths that life takes when we least expect it. Follow the story of Emily, a woman who discovers her husband's affair while caring for her dying father-in-law. As she uncovers hidden truths and faces emotional battles, Emily learns profound lessons about family, justice, and resilience. Join us as we dive into a story of strength, healing, and the choices that shape our future. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to begin today's story with us. It was the most unexpected moment. I had never imagined that the discovery of my husband's betrayal would come at a time when my world seemed to be falling apart. The sickening sense of betrayal would not be revealed in some grand confrontation. Nor would it involve an overtly dramatic moment. Instead, it came as a whisper, a flicker of light in the dimness of the room. A message on his phone that should have never been there. I was changing my father-in-law Richard's bedsheets, tending to his needs as he lay frail and weak in the guest room. He was slowly succumbing to pancreatic cancer, and I had become his primary caregiver. Richard had been my rock since I had married Adam. He was a man of wisdom and grace, his strength holding our family together even when Adam's weaknesses started to surface. Richard, despite his pain and discomfort, was always there for me with words of comfort when I needed them most. I had moved him into our home to ensure he had the best care possible during these final months. But while I was immersed in caring for Richard, Adam, my husband, seemed to drift farther away. Adam told me his work was demanding, that the long hours and stressful meetings left him little room for anything else. I believed him, at least at first. The late nights, the phone calls from the office, the constant hum of the professional world, it all seemed legitimate. But as the weeks went on, something felt off. I could sense it. Adam's absence was more than just from the house. It was emotional. His distance, his lack of attention, and his reluctance to even engage in basic conversations with me. It was all so glaring. I remember the day so clearly. I had just finished changing Richard's sheets, smoothing out the wrinkles, trying to make him comfortable. The hospice nurse would be arriving soon, and there were so many things still to do. Richard called me over to him, his voice weak but steady, and in a tone that was both curious and knowing. He asked, "Is everything all right? You've been staring at that phone for quite a while." I quickly placed Adam's phone back on the nightstand, forcing a smile. "Oh, everything's fine, Richard," I said, trying to mask the unease swirling inside me. "I just got lost in thought. How about some fresh water?" Richard let out a small chuckle, but it was followed by a pained wince. "You're a terrible liar, Emily," he said, "but you're the kindest soul I know. Adam doesn't deserve you." I adjusted his pillows, pretending I hadn't heard that last part, though it hit me like a ton of bricks. Richard knew more than I had realized. And he was right. Adam didn't deserve me, and somewhere deep inside, I was starting to accept that truth. The hours seemed to drag on as I cared for Richard, my mind racing with questions. Was it possible that my suspicions were real? Was Adam really betraying me? The feeling that something was wrong gnawed at me every minute of every day. But I couldn't bring myself to confront it. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Olivia. She was a friend I had known for years. Someone who had been by my side through thick and thin. Her text simply said, "Coffee emergency. Need to see you ASAP." I knew she could sense something was wrong too. She always had an intuition for these things. I told Richard I'd be back soon and left the house, needing a moment to collect my thoughts, to breathe away the tension that had settled in my chest. When I arrived at the cafe, I was a mess, my hands trembling as I pulled out Adam's phone to show Olivia the message I had found. "Look at this," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. "It's from someone saved as Mia. It says, 'Missing you already. Can't wait for tonight.'" Olivia's eyes widened as she read the message. Her face hardened, her hand gripping mine with an urgency I hadn't seen before. "Have you confronted him?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with disbelief. "Not yet," I answered, feeling the weight of the world crashing down on me. "I need to be smart about this, especially with Richard's condition and Ethan to think about." Olivia nodded. "You're right, but you need to document everything, messages, late nights, any suspicious charges, You have to be prepared. Prepared for what? I asked, barely able to comprehend what was happening. Divorce. Olivia replied bluntly. I know you haven't confronted him yet. And you shouldn't until you're ready. But men like Adam, they don't just have affairs. They plan exits. Trust me, I've seen this before. I felt as if the ground beneath me was slipping. How had things gone so wrong? How had I let myself ignore the signs for so long? I'll send you Kenneth's number, Olivia said, referring to her cousin, a divorce lawyer who would be a lifeline if things went down this path. But right now, document everything, for your own peace of mind. I left the cafe with a sense of purpose but also a deep, crushing sadness. I had to face the truth. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when my marriage was falling apart before my eyes. I returned home to find Richard watching old family videos on the small TV in his room. On the screen, a younger version of Adam, so full of life, was recording Ethan opening Christmas presents. Richard smiled softly as he watched. He was a good father then, Richard murmured, before the promotion, before the money went to his head. I continued to tend to Richard, organizing his medications and trying to keep the sadness at bay. My mind kept returning to those words. Before the promotion, before the money went to his head. Had Adam really changed that much? Had I allowed myself to ignore who he was becoming? The front door creaked open, and I heard Adam's voice echo from downstairs. His usual tone, distant and impatient. Emily, are you home? I called back, trying to steady my nerves. Up here. Adam appeared in the doorway, looking irritated. Why weren't you answering your phone? I've been trying to reach you. I was getting coffee with Olivia, I replied, a tinge of defensiveness creeping into my voice. Is everything okay? I need you to pick up Ethan today, Adam said, his tone dismissive. I have an important client dinner. I paused, heart sinking. Was he really going to act like everything was normal? On a Tuesday? I asked, barely concealing my disbelief. Adam shot me a cold look. Some of us still have to work, Emily, he said, before turning to leave. Richard cleared his throat from his bed. Must be some client, he muttered under his breath. But his voice carried an edge that I rarely heard. Adam didn't respond, but the tension in the room had already thickened. I managed to get through the rest of the evening, picking up Ethan from school and pretending like everything was fine. But deep inside, I knew that something was broken. Something had snapped, and we could never go back to what we once were. The evening passed in a blur of tasks, homework, dinner, and the constant hum of life around me. But my mind was still caught in a whirlwind of thoughts. I kept replaying the message from Mia over and over in my head. I knew I had to confront Adam. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. The situation with Richard was becoming more delicate by the day. And I couldn't afford to make any rash decisions. The weight of my responsibilities pressed on me. But I also had to think about Ethan. His world was already shaken with his grandfather's illness. He didn't need the added weight of knowing his father's betrayal. Not yet. The next day was a blur. I took Ethan to school, spoke with the hospice nurse, and tried to keep my focus on Richard's care. But all the while, I knew there were things I couldn't ignore any longer. I needed a plan. I needed to protect Ethan. To protect myself. The reality of the situation began to set in. And there was no turning back now. Later that afternoon, Olivia texted me again. Her words were simple but carried an urgent weight. We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow at 10? I knew exactly what this meant. She had been through this before. And she had been right about everything so far. The following morning, I met Olivia at the cafe again. She handed me a file. Inside were documents about divorce proceedings, custody battles, and a list of things I needed to consider. As I skimmed through the pages, I felt a deep sense of dread. This wasn't the life I had planned for myself. For Ethan, but as Olivia pointed out, I didn't have much of a choice. Adam's actions had left me no other option. You're going to have to be prepared for him to fight dirty, Olivia warned, her voice gentle but firm. He's not going to go down without a fight. And he'll try to take Ethan from you. Trust me. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of those words. My eyes drifted over the papers in front of me. Documents for custody, financial records, and notes that could be crucial for my case. There was one thing I couldn't ignore though. A letter from Richard. He had asked me to keep it safe. And now it seemed that this was the right time to open it. But not yet. Not until I was sure Adam was truly capable of the betrayal I feared. When I returned home, Richard was in a rare moment of clarity. His body was weak, but his mind still sharp. He sat in his chair, staring at old family videos of Adam and Ethan. I could see the sadness in his eyes as he watched his son. A man he had once been proud of, now so distant and cold. He was a father who had given everything to ensure his family's success. And yet here he was, his son preparing to destroy it all. Emily. Richard's voice broke through my thoughts, his gaze turning toward me. There's something I need to tell you. Something important. I sat beside him, trying to focus on his words. I've been watching Adam for a long time. Richard continued, his voice soft but steady. And I can tell he's not the man he once was. He's been lying to you, Emily. He's been lying to all of us. You need to be prepared for what's coming. Prepared for what? I asked, my heart racing. Richard sighed deeply, his gaze turning toward the window, where the light of the afternoon filtered in. I've made changes to my will. And I want you to know what's in it, in case something happens to me before you have a chance to look. I felt a chill run down my spine. What was he talking about? What could he possibly have done? I've made sure that Ethan will be taken care of, Richard continued. And I've made sure that Adam won't have control over the company or over you. Not anymore. I sat in stunned silence as Richard handed me the envelope. It was sealed, and I knew I couldn't open it yet. He made me promise to wait until I had no other choice. You're strong, Emily, Richard said quietly. But this is going to be hard. I know it, but you need to be strong for Ethan. And when the time comes, you'll know what to do. With that, Richard's grip tightened around my hand. And I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. He had done everything he could to protect me. And now, it was my turn to protect my son and our future. I left the room that afternoon, clutching the envelope in my hand, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I wasn't ready for what was coming. But I knew I had to be. For Ethan, for Richard, and for myself. There was no turning back now. The days that followed Richard's death were a blur. I moved through the motions of grief and loss, trying to balance the emotional weight of my father-in-law's passing while still managing the day-to-day chaos that had overtaken my life. Adam, for all his distance and coldness, was still present, though it felt like he was barely there. He was too consumed by his own plans, his own world, but I had other priorities now. The envelopes that Richard had left for me weighed heavy in my pocket. Reminders of the battles I knew I would have to face. It wasn't until the funeral that the reality of what Richard had warned me about truly hit. Adam, surrounded by Mia and his lawyer, was acting as if nothing had changed. The grief he displayed was so thin, so shallow, it was almost insulting. He had already begun making plans for himself. And as I watched him at the funeral, laughing quietly with Mia, I knew he wasn't mourning the same way I was. He wasn't grieving the same loss. That evening, when we returned to the house, I found myself alone with Ethan for a moment. The weight of my son's confusion and sadness pressed heavily on me. He missed his grandfather so much. And I knew, no matter how much Adam tried to pretend, that Ethan felt the shift. He felt his father's absence, his emotional withdrawal more than his physical one. Mom, Ethan said, looking up at me with wide eyes. Why is Dad acting like nothing's wrong? I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. He's grieving, sweetheart, just in his own way. Is that how grown-ups grieve? By ignoring everything? My heart broke as I looked at him. So young and yet so perceptive. Sometimes, honey, people don't know how to handle sadness. And they act out in different ways. But you and I will always be here for each other. Ethan nodded, though his face remained troubled. It was then that I knew I had to do more than just protect him from Adam's betrayal. I had to show him what it meant to stand up for what was right. To value love and family over everything else. Richard had always said that love was the most powerful force in the world. And it was that love that I needed to find in myself to shield Ethan from the hurt and betrayal that Adam had brought into our lives. The next morning, I called Olivia. My phone rang a few times before she picked up. Holly, What's going on? She asked. Sensing my urgency. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady but firm. I need to meet with Kenneth. I want to file for divorce. Olivia didn't hesitate. I'll set it up. But remember what I told you. This isn't just about your marriage. This is about Ethan, and we need to make sure we have everything we need to fight for his future. That afternoon, I found myself sitting across from Kenneth, her cousin, who was a divorce lawyer. I showed him the documentation I had gathered, the photos of Adam's late-night departures, the credit card statements, the hotel charges. I also showed him the letters from Richard. The first letter, the one I had promised not to open until the time was right, was now crucial. It was everything I needed to move forward, to expose Adam for what he had truly become. Kenneth reviewed everything with a practiced eye. This is good, but we need more, he said. Has Richard made any official statements about his estate? About what he wanted for his son? I hesitated, then pulled the sealed envelope from my bag. He gave this to me, I said, my voice quiet but firm. He made changes to his will, and I promised I wouldn't open it until the time was right. Kenneth nodded solemnly. Let's not rush it. We'll need to make sure we have every piece of the puzzle before we move forward. When I returned home, the house felt emptier than ever. Adam was out, as usual, likely with Mia. Ethan was upstairs in his room, his door slightly ajar. I walked toward the room where Richard had passed away, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on me. I knew what I had to do now. It wasn't just about getting through this. It was about protecting Ethan. About ensuring that Adam didn't take everything from us. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, I sat down in the quiet of the house and opened the envelope. Richard's handwriting was on the top, and I could almost hear his voice as I read his final words. If you're reading this, Emily, I've passed on, and Adam has done exactly what I feared he would. He's trying to take Ethan from you, using his money and connections to paint you as unfit. Let me set the record straight. As I read on, I felt the weight of his words settle around me. Richard had known all along what Adam was capable of, and he had made sure I was prepared. The documents that followed were detailed, laying out Adam's wrongdoings, his embezzlement of company funds, his affair with Mia, the ways he had hurt his family for his own gain. I held the papers close to my chest, feeling the enormity of what I had to do. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about protecting the future of my son. And I was ready to fight, ready to do whatever it took. Tomorrow, we would begin the battle. But tonight, I held those papers in my hands and promised myself that I would not back down. For Ethan, for Richard, for the love that still lived in this house. In the months that followed, life began to slowly rebuild itself around the ashes of what had once been. Adam's withdrawal from the company, along with his loss of authority, was a sobering lesson for him. Though he had lost everything he thought mattered, the court case had forced him to confront his actions. And I could see, in the quiet moments, the change in him. He began taking more time with Ethan, repairing the frayed bonds between father and son. There was still so much to heal, but we had taken the first steps toward rebuilding trust and finding a new path forward. I had never imagined that my life would take such a dramatic turn. But through it all, I learned something crucial. Sometimes, life doesn't follow the script we hope for. Sometimes, we must face the harsh realities of betrayal and loss. But it is through those moments of crisis that we learn what truly matters. For me, it was never the money or the status that defined us, it was love, honor, and the strength to stand for what was right, even when the world around us was falling apart. As I watched Ethan grow, I saw the lessons of resilience and empathy take root in him, just as they had in Richard's garden. With each passing day, I felt more at peace, knowing that the legacy of love and integrity Richard had fought for was living on in us. Thank you for following this story. Please remember to subscribe to our channel for more life stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Life has a way of surprising us, but it's in our response that we find the power to shape our future.